you all are acquainted with Brown's data set. You may have heard. Have you heard? You have heard of? No. So prowess is a farm level or company level data set, which is maintained by a company called Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy. It gives you data from the balance sheets of farms from the registered industrial sector of India. It doesn't cover unregistered sector. It covers most of the farms in this data set are listed in the majority of the Indian stock exchanges. So these are essentially the big industrial sector or of India. So how is it the question that comes to your mind that should come to your mind, whether is it representative of the farms in India? More or less, yes, because prowess gives you the more or less the farms in the prowess gives you the 70% of all the economic activity that is done from the registry. If registered industrial sector in India produces 100 Indian rupees of output, the farms in prowess gives you about 70% of that. It covers much higher in terms of the taxes because these are big farms. This gives you a lot of corporate taxes. So if you think about taxes, these farms cover about 90% of all the taxes, corporate taxes and excise taxes collected in India. So these are essentially these farms comprise of an essentially a dominant percentage of the Indian registered industrial, and it cuts across all the manufacturing sectors of India. All the manufacturing sectors of India. So let me open one and give you an example. And the data, the couple of few advantages of the prowess data set is first, it's a panel. So it tracks farms over the years. Each and every farm it tracks over the years. To understand what is going on, we need a panel level information at the farm level because you understand for the same farm what is going on over the years, how the same farm is behaving over the years. That's why panel information is very crucial, right? So this is one main advantage. The other main advantage of prowess is it gives you the trade information at the farm level. So you know at the farm level if a farm is an exporter or not, a farm is an importer or not. You still, if you go back to the ASI, you know farm is an importer or not because it gives you information on imported inputs, but only ASI starts giving information on exporter from 2016 onward. Before ASI didn't have any information on exporters. So that's why prowess is important because it gives you a lot of trade information, it gives you a lot of unique information that you don't get in other data sets. So let me open the first one. So you can open a do file. So this is, I'm pretty much sure you've done this. So what I'm doing is, yes, any questions as of now? We haven't received do file. You haven't? We haven't received do file. Oh, okay. You haven't even. You can write the do file actually. Okay. So do I send the do file or do you want to write the do file? However it works. Yes. That would be because that way you can write the do file. You know how to write the do file. Then it's there. I'll go back and check. Wouldn't be a problem. Then you have a hands-on experience to write the do file. This, if you're an applied person, whichever field you are, this would be your bread and butter. Believe me. More or less. If you are in applied fields, to write commands. If you go work even in the technological sector, you will be using you'll be working in the technological sector, you'll use Python, but you have to write command files. Okay, so let me reload the data set first. What I'm doing is I am clearing my matrix, I'm clearing the data editor, and I'm loading the data set first, which is the data set 1. You can load the data set. So the data set looks like this. You have the company name. The data set runs from 1990 till 2011. You can see for every farm, I know the information from 1990 till 2011. And such and such. The name of the farms, there is, so you need a unique farm ID. So you have to give a farm ID to every farm, needs to have a unique ID to give to estimate. Because otherwise the data cannot identify from farms to farms. So you have to give a unique ID to the farm. It gives you the ownership group, which is good. Will be in which ownership the farm has. You can see the ownership. I have created an indicator for ownership. 1 and such 2. There is an incorporation here which gives you when the farm is established, so you can actually calculate the age of the farm. Then you have imports of stores and spares. There is import of capital, there is import of finished goods, there is import of raw materials, there is total imports, such and such. So this is the type of data set when you load farm level data set. This is the type of information that you will see, more or less. So this is GVA, gross value added of a farm. Then this is total exports of a farm. You can relabel them. We will do that. And I have a lot of information on wages of a farm, different sets of wages the farms gives. So there is wages on managerial compensation. By wages on managerial compensation, there is information on director composition, there is information on executive directors, there is information on non-managerial compensation. All this information Prowess gives you. So what we'll do is, first, let's do exporters versus non-exporters. This is was actually the foundation of the heterogeneous farm theory, whether exporters are different from non-exporters or not, or importers versus non-importers. So what we'll do is, first, because exporters, what you need to do is, you need to first, because not all export farms or farms exports every year. What I've done is I've first replaced total exports. You can label first. So what you can do is you can label, let's say, var total X as total exports. That you can do for your, and see it's now if I go to total exports, you can see you have the variable total exports relabeled because these are all coded. Total exports was code. Then I have named that variable as total exports. Why do I need the total exports? Because I need to identify from the total exports which is an exporter and which is a non-exporter. That's what I need to identify. Then I have total exports replacing as 0 if there is no information on total exports. Because I need to know which years or which farms does not export. Because I need to define the exporters versus non-exporters. Then I generate a variable called exporter, which takes a value 0. Now, how do I define relabel this? I relabel exporter is equals to 1 if total exports is greater than 0. If total exports, if your farm is exporting greater than 0, then simply exporter is equals to 1. Then what I do is I'll see whether I have actually created that variable properly or not. Now that means the exporter will be a dummy variable. It's a binary indicator. I need 1 for an exporter and I need 0 for a non-exporter. That's what I need to do. So let's see if, so first I create this. We used to do like this. It's already done actually. So exporter 0, I have created. Then you can see replace exporter 1. And then if I tab exporter, so you can see it's actually 43,000 more or less. So in our data set, we have about 22% of, so this is 1. If I tap that, it gives me that 20 to 22% about farms are exporters, about 80% farms are non-exporters, which is again 80 to 20 rule. You can see it's very, very similar. Even for the Indian data set, we find very similar kind of numbers. We saw it in the morning for the US data set, for the German data set, the German, for the European. Even if we use Indian data set, the numbers are pretty much the similar. Around 80, again, the ratio is 80-20. Right? So now I've created the variable properly. Then I have exporters, I have non-exporters in my data. Now I tend to see does these variables, does the different kinds of features of these farms versus these farms are different or not? Are these farms actually different or not? First, let me do some stylized facts. We call it stylized facts. What do you mean by stylized facts? Stylized facts is we compare the average numbers. I'll do the same for the others. I just put if there is no putting it 0 for the others variable. So what I'll do is I'll look at sales. These are the performance indicators. Sales of a firm, the gross value added of a firm. I also know the number of, let me label this so it will be easier for you guys. I have a reading glass now.
So you are imputing 0 when values are missing.
Come again?
You are imputing zeros when values are missing.
Missing, yeah. Because
but sales value cannot be
0. I know. Sales value cannot be 0. If you do away with this, the results is pretty much the same. It's just to take the entire value into consideration, all the values into consideration.
Is it right?
So the way the prowess says, I know you're concerned. So we generally don't do this. But the concern prowess says basically if your sales value is prowess do not report anything when the sales value is very, very low.
Yes.
That's the point. So that's why it's close to 0. Even if you don't do this, the results are pretty much the same. I've checked this. More or less, it's pretty much the same. Even when we do gross value added, what we actually do is we actually you'll see a lot of when you look at the data, you'll see gross value added is negative in a lot of cases, which is an accounting error. So you actually drop negative values of gross value added and comprise the data set like that.
So you will change the variable name. That is total exports.
Oh, yes. Thank you. See, these two glasses, I'm not. So this is the product scope of a firm. This is gross value added. What do I mean by product scope? It's the number of products produced by a firm. This is another advantage of prowess. Prowess gives you the number of products produced by one firm. So you can actually calculate the number of products produced, which you call it product scope, the number of products produced by a firm. This is total inputs. The other advantage of prowess is prowess gives you inputs at 4 different categories actually. So it gives you, I have calculated total inputs, but it gives you inputs in terms of inputs of raw materials, in terms of inputs of capital goods, inputs of finished goods, inputs of stores and spares. Not many data sets gives like this. You can actually classify inputs into several categories in this case. So I'm just including total inputs here. We can this is assets. The other advantage of prowess is these two variables. This is also absent in ASI. This is the foreign technology transfer. The firm has spent on foreign. The firm has spent on the foreign expenses on foreign technology transfer, and this is R&D. R&D CC means basically this is capital and current put together. So R&D also is not given in the ASI. So you know the amount of expenses done by a firm on research and development. Because these are all like very good advantages of using prowess. So you know the innovation expenditure of the firms as well. Let me change. There is also domestic technology transfer. Prowess gives you data also on domestic technology transfer. So you know expenses on how much technology the firm has actually used. Consulting, technology consulting, all these firms give prowess gives you. These are the ones are the inputs of a prowess of a firm. So this is capital being employed by a firm. This is the power, fuel, and water expenses by a firm, which is energy expenses. And this is the total compensation of a firm, that is basically labor expenditure. So you know capital, you know energy, you know labor as well. So all this made prowess very, very popular. The other two, I want to show, even within the labor compensation, the other two, what prowess gives you, in fact, much more in details, is max. So MCOM is basically managerial compensation, and NMCOM is non-managerial compensation. That means this is the amount of money that has gone to managers of a firm. This is the amount of money that has gone to non-managers of a firm. So this is also crucial when you want to understand the labor market changes. I have a paper on this. Let me. Now you can see all these are labeled. So I have a paper on managerial on India, actually utilizing this. We will do tomorrow, just to give on this about managerial and non-managerial, to see whether India's trade liberalization has different set of effects on managers versus non-managers on farm. We find there is a significant effect that happened because of trade liberalization on Indian managers versus non-managers. Okay, let me run this. I hope I have labeled them correctly. Let me change Yes, no red color. All these are properly defined. So you can see that farms also, what I have done is the farms, all these have industry indicators. So all these farms belong to NIC, National Industrial Classification 2004, two-digit level, National Industrial Classification 2004 at the three-digit level, at the four-digit level. And I've mapped this also with the NIC 2008 classification because this is the current classification that farms gives you, the farms industry classification. Then I have to go back and match with this because I need tariff level information. And the tariffs come at the industry level. For any farm belonging to that industry has the same amount, as an exposure to the same amount of tariffs. The tariff doesn't vary by farm, it varies by industry. The disaggregated, it varies by product as well. The best is actually the product level varieties, but then you have to know which product varieties are the HS put the farmers producing, which we don't know in Indian case. The second best solution is to have it at this level, at the four-digit level. So every farm you can see has an industrial classification as well. So let me run this. So what I'm doing next is I am trying to have some summarize. Summarize gives you basic, average, and standard deviation. So by sort exporter, I am sorting the data by exporter. Exporter is a dummy variable, 0 and 1, and I am calculating the average values of sales, gross value added, product scope, total inputs and assets to see whether the average values are actually differs by exporter or non-exporter or not. If I run one of this, you can see this is the mean of non-exporters and these are the means of exporters. Now see carefully. An exporter, non-exporter, sales is 4,000. This is INR million. An exporter sells about 4,000 million Indian rupees or worth of goods, whereas a non-exporter sells about 143 million INR. So it's more than 20-30%. 30% higher an exporter sells rather than the non-exporters. Yes.
So in this case, if we are taking certain years the data, and even for 1 year that firm is exporting, it will take value 1, and it will consider that firm to be an exporter firm, which is wrong.
So yes, absolutely right. So this is a good point. Let me come. So what we in general do is, otherwise, if you take one way, what we do, we create an average for all the years for that farm. If the average is greater than 0, then we classify it as a non-exporter. It's just for the sake of simple exercise I'm doing this, but
If a firm is exporting it once, then it remains once exporter always.
yes. If the value is greater than 0 average across all the years, then we consider it differs.
Even if for 1 year.
So when I'm averaging over all the years, if it's one positive for even 1 year, it will become positive, right? Then you classify it as exporter. Yes, absolutely. Do file. Please, absolutely. It should. I am absolutely. Yeah. Zoom out. Ah,
What I did was, if I'm taking 10 years, if the exporting value is present for more than 5 years, I'm considering that firm to be an exporter firm.
Generally, we do it 3 years.
Okay.
3 years is the standard. If you have exported, let's say I have 10 years of data. If you have exported more than 3 years, then it will consider it.
So that is also fine. I'm not considering like 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just you take the average over the years. She made a good point. So what she made the point was, you can imagine when I'm classifying the exporters, I'm using 1 and 0. Now it can happen that a farm which has exported for years. I have 10 years of data. The farm is exported for 9 years and not 1 year. For that 1 year, the farm takes a value 0, and for the other 9 years takes a value 1. So in my sample of non-exporters for that year, that farm is included. The problem with this is basically we can have certain farms which goes both in the exporter category as in the non-exporter category. So for this to identify, that's why I want to write the problem. Then what we do is exactly. So what we do is here, if we want to define the other way, what we do is by sort year, E gen, let's say T exports equals to sum tot exports. So we are generating by, sorry. So what I'm doing is by farm ID. Okay. Every farm, remember, every farm has a unique ID. Okay, so by farm ID, for every farm ID, I'm creating total exports across all the years for every farm. So what it will do is that new variable, it will sum this variable for every farm. There will be one value, just one value. That's what we are trying to do. That you can do it as average as well. I can do it as mean. It will be exactly the same. If the point is, if over the years you can put it this in range as well. If it has taken over more than 2 years, more than 3 years, however you want to do it. But the point is to just classify, separate out the control group, which is, let's say, the non-exporters versus the treatment group, which is the exporting farms. So you can also define this way. And then it's the same. Then you can define generate exporter again. So we can do this and see. Let's see. Dot expose. No, sorry, it's not dot xx. Sorry. So see, it has created. Let us go and check what it has created. So you can see there is just one value for that farm across all the years. Now it has 0 if that hasn't been exported at all. So you can then we can create another exporter. Let's say generate new exporter equals to 0. Replace new exporter equals to 1 if T exports greater than 0. Sorry, greater than 0. Tab new exporter. Now I want to see whether there is a correlation between the way I have first defined this exporter and the new one. What is the correlation? How much I was losing out? So I hope all of them are right. Yes. So it's pretty much 45%. So it's pretty much half. It's good. It's not low. So this is the other way you can actually do. So you can see if I do it by my old method. So an exporter spends 19 million on an average in a year on R&D. A non-exporter spends 0.1314 million. This is 20% higher, 2,000% higher, 200,000 times higher from this. Exporter spends about 10 billion Indian rupees on expense on foreign technology transfer, whereas it's 0.5 million. So if it's 20 times higher, 20 times means 2,000% higher. Is that the difference between an exporter and a non-exporter? Is that very much a farm is different? Let me go back to this. You can see a farm, an exporter has 2,000 million about gross value added, whereas for non-exporter it is just 50 million. It's 40 times higher. All years, this is average. For all years, this is an average. We just want to compare that. You can see our exporter produces about 4 products This is the products, the number of products. For a non-exporter, it produces on average 1.5 products. Assets, an exporter has an assets of 4,500 million INR. For a non-exporter, you have only 200. So again, it's very much 200% to 20 times higher, 2000% higher. So exporters are very, very different than non-exporters. Even for Indian, any data set you pick up, the exporters are very different than non-exporters. This is the performance variables, right? Let's go and check whether does they differ in terms of inputs or not. Inputs they use. Capital employed, you can see an exporter uses the amount of capital they uses 3,000 million. The amount of capital they employ, and this is just 1 to 37 million. The amount of energy expenses is 171 million, 9.5 million. The amount of wages they give, total amount of wages, average wage is 230 million in a year. This is 12 million. This is again 20 times higher, which is 2000%. Let us go and check whether how are the managers and the non-managers get paid if you work in an exporter versus non-exporter. If you're a manager and exporter, an average exporter shells out 222 million Indian rupees for paying out managers. Total, I'm saying an average. An exporter gives 9. So you can imagine an average salary. If you're working for an exporter, that means you are getting 20 times more salary or more if you work for an exporter versus non-exporter. But non-managerial difference is not that high. Sorry, managerial, non-managerial difference is very high. The point being is very, very highly different in terms of even the salaries you get when you are work for managers and non-managers. So, but all of this, what I have calculated is average numbers. We do not control for any unobservables. Let us check if we control for unobservables, then does the difference still hold? What I mean by unobservables is, you can see this I'm regressing now. Regressing cells on exporter variable. So the difference would give me the difference between an exporter and the non-exporter. What I'm doing here, I'm controlling for firm fixed effects. You have all done econometrics by now, I'm pretty much sure. You're aware of this term called fixed effects. Right? Fixed effects, you control for the unobservable characteristics. Now, a firm might have certain unobservable characteristics that I'm not controlling before. Here, I'm controlling for firm characteristics, unobservable characteristics. And here, I'm controlling for industry, because certain industries might pay more than other certain industries, which I don't observe. Certain industries have, like, let's say if you're working on petrochemical industries, petrochemical industries would pay more because you're working in a high-tech plant, rather than if you're working in a leather industry. By default, these industries have structure when they pay more. So what I'm doing here, I'm controlling for this unobservable characteristics so that I can find out the true essence of the difference. And I'm also clustering, this means I'm clustering my standard errors by firm. That means
one firm, one item.
Yes, one firm takes a unique item. So every firm has to take an unique item. Even if you're doing at the water level, even if you're doing any data set, when you are estimating panel, the point being every unit of observation has to take an unique item. If you're doing at the state level, every state in India has to take at the unique item. That's otherwise you cannot, then the data set will be a pooled data set or a repeated cross section. The SCADA will treat it like that because you have to give data the command, this is actually a panel. Otherwise, how would SCADA understand? So I'm clustering my standard errors at the firm level because the data varies at the firm level, and there could be autocorrelations between one firm to one firm. That's why I'm clustering it at the firm level, so that the estimate that I observe is actually that for that firm only. We are controlling for the autocorrelations between firms. That's why I'm clustering it at the firm level here, because there could be autocorrelation between exporter and the non-exporter, spillover effects between an exporter and then maybe I am a non-exporter located closely to you as an exporter. I derive some benefits from you. That's why my sales goes up. Could be possible, right? That's why we're clustering at the firm level, so they're called control for all these kind of autocorrelations between firms.
RYD is control. Like we take a domain for manually do the.
You don't need that manually. Can you imagine how many firms there are here? Let me check. You have to create dummies for everyone. So let me check. Code book, if we do. So there are 9,000 farms. So you don't need to do. You have to create 9,000 dummies.
Oh yeah.
For everyone. It's essentially the same. It will produce the same, exactly the same output. But you don't need to. There's an efficient way of doing this.
Sir, if we do group by for a.
So group, when we do group, we combine. If we are double clustering, then we do group. Let's say you want to cluster your standard errors at the farm year level. You want to cluster standard errors at the industrial level. Then we create a new variable. We call it group. The command is group, and then in brackets we put these two variables. Then we call it double clustering. Okay. Everything is visible, right? More or less. Now, so if I run this, so you can see controlling for everything, an exporter earns 1,000 million, which is about 1 billion. 1,000 million means about 1 billion. 1 billion of Indian rupees more from sales rather than a non-exporter. This is a dummy variable. So the beta coefficient gives you the difference between an exporter and a non-exporter. It's a relative, it's not an absolute effect. It's a relative effect between an exporter and the non-exporter. And this is highly significant. So an exporter in India controlling for everything earns 1 billion more rupees than a non-exporting firm, which is huge. Can you imagine 1 billion more in sales than a non-exporter? So that different an exporter versus non-exporter is. And this is controlling for industry. This is controlling for what does it say? This is what does it mean if I control for industry fixed effects at the 4-digit level? That means this is actually a within industry effect. That means a farm within, let's say, leather industry, for example, earns an exporter within a leather industry earns 1 billion more than a non-exporter within the leather industry. A farm and a textile industry earn 1 billion more than a farm within a textile industry. That's why I have controlling, because otherwise, if I don't control for this, then it could be between, it could be within, I don't know. That's why I'm controlling for, and this is, you can imagine, this is 4-digit industry. This is as disaggregated it can go. Even at this disaggregated level, the numbers are so high. If you go up, the numbers would be more actually. So this is even controlling for this, and this is similar for, if we do product scope, the number of products produced, you can see even within a narrowly defined industry, our exporter produces about 1.5 products more than a non-exporter. This is a relative difference again. Okay. And this is highly, you can see the p-values, these are highly significant. But try and use this new command called reg HDFE if you're not using it. It doesn't, it's very efficient. It produces the output very efficiently. It doesn't give you the fixed effects coefficients. It just gives you the one you want. Huh? Reg HDFE. I'll give you the do file, so don't worry.
So there is now a new this RCC random effect.
There is one.
Mixture of fixed effect and random effect.
Okay. Oh, there is new one. Okay, nice. There is, what is in terms of difference between R&D controlling for 3 million more R&D, they spend 3.5 million in R&D more an exporter spends than a non-exporter, even within a narrowly defined industry. Okay. This is capital employed. You can see again, 963. So about $1 billion capital employed by an exporter than a non-exporter. So that capital intensive an exporter is rather than non-exporters. So that means the exporters are actually a lot of exporters are capital intensive firms, even within narrowly defined 4-digit industries. You can imagine, even within this narrowly defined industries, an exporter uses that amount of extra capital rather than a non-exporter. So how different firms can be?
Sir, capital intensive means we have to deflate it by employment.
You can deflate it by, however, because capital employed means even if you deflate by employed, the numbers will be very high. So it's basically the amount of capital employed by a exporter, non-exporter. Yes, if you actually want to have the true essence of capital intensity, then K by output, K by sales, however you want to define. The number will be pretty much the same. It will be very, very high. I wanted to show you the amount. That's what, nothing else. How much they are. And this is wages. So an exporter spends 57 million more in wages than a non-exporter. So it's a large farms, they give out more money, they employ more capital, they spend more on R&D, they sell more. So whatever we have seen in terms of theory is actually true. And see, even
How kind of productivity to export?
Oh, that is very difficult. That brings an exercise to do. That's not easy. The cutoff for productivity, where the farms switch, is very interesting, obviously. But we have to calculate the productivity distribution. You have to observe an average farm where they're exporting. You have to normalize that to zero to see where the cutoffs is actually where the farms are switching. But there, I'm pretty much sure that would be a class interval. It cannot be just one number. It's somewhere, around that number, the firm switch. So let's see whether is this similar for importers versus non-importers or not. Very similarly, you can see India has a bit high amount of importers. India has about 26% importers and 74% non-importers. So we are a little bit more importers than exporters in India. And are the numbers pretty much similar? So an importer sells about, again, 960 million of money of sales than a non-importer. Yes, you were saying something.
Just wait.
Sure, absolutely. As I said, please see if I'm going fast, if I'm doing wrong.
Here, so when you created that exported away and then new exported away, the correlation was
0.5.
So what does that mean?
But isn't it, I mean, not that way if I define it that way. Like the new exporter is the one if you want to truly define. So I'm not, what I'm doing is the way I defined it, I am aggregating a lot of variables together. So that's not the right way to do it. Even if I do the way you said it, the numbers will be much higher. Yeah. So 45% means basically I am more or less half of the exporters of your group and my group are similar. And so my estimates are basically the way I defined it, my estimates are lower because I am taking an exporter to both the groups. So it's actually pulling down the values. Or pulling up the non-exporter values and pulling down the exporter values. So the difference would be larger if I do that way. And if the way you actually said that actually that's the way to do it, the numbers would be much higher. Because I am offsetting by including the same farm into taking out from one group and putting into another group.
What is the ideal way then?
The one we did it the new exporter way. That should be like it. If I use the product scope, It's very similar. You can see importer also produces about 1.5 more products than a non-importer. You can use the same as you can define it a farm is a farm exporter as well as importer. You can define it and see whether these things persist or not, and it should persist. This kind of differences. An importer, for his amount of, you can see an importer spends about 2.74 million more in R&D rather than one importer.
So if we make another value from this, like the export divided by sales.
The export divided by sales.
Total volume of export divided by total sales.
That's export intensity. It's the same. However you define it, it's just the theory doesn't change. When you have a very strong theory, you change the indicators, that the theoretical implication of the result wouldn't change. It would the coefficient will obviously change, but the essence of the results or the implications wouldn't change at all. The significant, it will be significant. Then C, capital employed is pretty much the same, like an importer, exporter. Its number of the wages is also the same. So the point being, if you work for an exporter farm which involves in trade, you get more money. Or you are working in a capital intensive farm, you are associated with a lot of sales compared to a farm which doesn't involve in trade, international trade.
These farms are generally MNC.
These farms are generally MNCs, big farms. Big farms. Let's see exporter importer dynamics. What I want to do is I want to calculate the number of exporters. So what I'm doing is by every year I'm generating an exporter variable, number of exporters. I'm counting exporter if the exporter takes a value 1, because that's what the exporter is, right? When an exporter takes a value 1 for every year, I want to count that. I don't want to count the zeros. That's why I count the exporter. Value 1, then I'm calculating. Then what I'm doing is I'm calculating that by every year I'll just calculate an average number of exporters. Rather than total, I will see an average number of exporters and then I'll plot it. Clear? I want to see that what I have seen as of now is the intensive margin of trade. Now I want to see the extensive margin, which is the number of exporters, does it change or not over the years. I hope this will. Yes. If I do this, it goes, yes, good. Let me plot. You can see it has, in 1990, we have about 750 exporters. It went up to, why did it decline? Can anyone say? Why did it decline? 2007 crisis, actually. This is 2007 crisis, the financial crisis. That's why there's a decline. But it went up to more than 5 times over the years. India, because India had a huge trade liberalization program in this time period, and a lot of firms started exporting. And if you see the importers, I'm pretty much sure we pretty much have the same kind of graph. Because we started exporting more, we started importing more. We started participation in a lot of things changed from the 1990s, if you have seen, in terms of, because it was export-driven growth that we had. It was a lot of growth also happened through import of intermediate inputs. Because when the input tariffs went down, we started importing a lot of high quality intermediate products from OECD countries to use them in our production functions. Our quality of products also went up than before. So all of this happened because of the trade liberalization program. Right, you can see this has gone up significantly. You can close this. Is it the same in the intensive margin of exports? You can see it's pretty much the same. Exports were so less in zero, about 5 million or something like this. Here in 2000, about 2010, 600 million. On average, exports went up by so much. So we had a huge increase in it, especially from here to here. If you see, it's actually true, and India had the highest growth rate ever recorded from 2001 to 2011. That was the highest growth rate ever recorded in India. And this is actually very much driven by participation. One of the reasons, there are many reasons for one event happening. One of the reasons was this high export performance by India. You can see this increase, compare this increase, this first decade increase and this increase.
There is structural break.
This is a structural break, yes. 2000 was a structural break because the reforms almost ended. The tariffs started dropping and started ending. Here, people were still understanding what is going on. Once the tariffs started, and the licensing of the industry started also happening from 97 to 2001, boom, it started happening there. And we had, or not only this is manufacturing, if you go back and see services growth, this is 2001 is a cutoff because that's a Y2K problem they have. If you know of this Y2K, people didn't know if this 2000 comes in the number, in the computer might not take because binary, all the zeros, computer might not react. Once this problem was solved, then there's a huge service outsourcing started happening here. If you plot for services data, you'll see exactly similar picture here as well. From 2000 onwards, the outsourcing started happening. India started exporting a lot of IT services. So a huge amount of growth happened in this point in time in India. And this was a crucial or a very important time of India's growth rate, because even if not this, if you talk about also the social sector, so in 2003-4, there was this Manrega was written, and a huge amount of poverty alleviation happened because of Manrega. There are many, if you want to read, there are many papers which have been done very carefully on Manrega. Right now, I don't know. I have heard many things about Manrega now, but the first 5-6 years, 2004 to 2011-12, there was serious work done on Manrega, and a lot of people were lifted out of poverty because of Manrega. So a huge amount of social, not only social, international progress, international trade progress we made, participation in world trade, we also made a lot of progress in terms of social sectors as well. You taking people out of poverty.
See, growth is happening, you have more revenue, and so you can spend on society.
Exactly. It has to happen across the sectors, right? If you see the importers is also pretty much the same. We have about 1,000 importers, and 3 times again, the drop is because of the 2008-9 crisis. It went 3 times.
But it was just opposite to exports.
That's the value of exports. So what happened? No, it's an interesting thing now. When you saw the number of exporters, it went down, right? But when you see the value, it went up. Why? Is that because a lot of firms exited? What happened was that means the adjustment is basically a lot of firms went out of the market, and the existing firms,
whether they are exited from the market or
they stopped exporting. Yeah, what I mean, the export market. That's why the average export for some exporters will increase now, because they have to serve those markets, right? The big firms never go out of market. The small firms would go out of the market. The big firms would produce more.
But sir, also the growth rate between 1990 to 1995 was very high in comparison to the later decade.
Because what happened was this is the time when the import tariffs were dropped. India first started importing a lot because the import tariffs were started dropped here. That's why imports were flooded before, then started exporting. Export is happening after. Yes, sir.
Basically import and export.
Yes.
लेकिन ये 8-9 में तो पूरे वर्ल्ड में क्राइसिस आ रहा है, तो वो एक्सपोर्ट हमारा इंक्रीजिंग क्यों रह गया? इंपोर्ट तो हमारा घटा, वो समझ में आता है, बट एक्सपोर्ट में वो उसका इम्पैक्ट क्यों नहीं पड़ा?
Exports were para actually. So if you look at what in India happened was exports were para. Basically, the exports, if I divide it by countries, if you go to the product level data, you will see the exports to the US and the EU drop. But what happened was the exports to Middle East, exports to Africa, exports to other countries increased, compensated for. So overall, there was this is for the registered industrial sector. Few firms, they diverted exports to other ones. So overall, that's why we see here the increase. And if I plot the value of imports, you can see this went up as well significantly. Whether there is another one, whether I want to do one more, whether there is size heterogeneity or not, whether different farms pay or behave differently, whether there is a difference between size or not. How do we define size? With assets. What I'm doing here in the first line. So in the first line, what I'm doing here, I am creating a group by industry and year. Because why I'm doing this? Because I want to compare farms within the industry. I don't want to compare the assets of a leather farm with the assets of a petrochemical farm, because that is not a right comparison. Because petrochemical farm, a farm which is big in the leather industry could be very small compared to a petrochemical farm. So you should not be doing, the idea is to compare the farms within industry. You're comparing basically leather to leather, petrochemical to petrochemical, pharmaceutical to pharmaceutical, something like this. Then I'm creating this mean assets by farm. By every farm, I'm creating the assets, average assets of a farm over every year within that group. And then I'm calculating the mean assets of it. Okay. And then I'm dividing all this into 4 different quartiles. One, this is a 4 different, you can do it 10, is exactly the same. You can do it quintiles, however you want to do it. This means a farm which has average assets over the years more than 75 percentile of the industry that the farm belongs is the big farms. Size 4, 50th to 75th size 3, 25th to 50th size 2, less than 25th size 1. So these are the smallest farms in that industry. Quartile 1, quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, quartile 4. You can do it by median, you can do it quintile, you can do it decile, however you want to do it. It's exactly similar command. You just change 4 to 2 or to 5 or to 10. Very simply.
So what is TN?
Come again? Oh, 10, temporary. I'm creating a temporary that will be replaced by this. So I created these 4 dummies. So these are dummies. These are more or less dummies, which will take 1 if the farm belongs to that asset category, otherwise 0. Then I interact these dummies with my exporter variable. Why I want to do that? I want to check whether there is inherent difference between a big non-exporting farm versus exporting farm. Both farms are big. I'm an exporter, you're a non-exporter. Whether still the differences lie or not. If I run this, is running the same command. Sales on the interaction terms, sales on these 2 interaction terms, sales on the 3rd quartile, sales on the 4th quartile. And I'm controlling for the same fixed effects. You can see even, so bigger farms, so you can see, this is interesting. In the small farms, there's no difference. But the big farms still have difference. The farms which are above the median still has large differences being an exporter and the non-exporter. This dominates by almost more than 10 times, 1000%. So big farms still differ being an exporter and the non-exporter. But when you go to the small farms, or the farms below the median, small and median farms, there is almost no difference between an exporter and the non-exporter. So again, these are relative effects. These are all relative effects. This one is comparing a farm which is a non-exporter but belong to the highest size category. This is comparing a farm which is a non-exporter in the 3rd quartile category. This is comparing a farm which is in the size category of 25th to 50th. So this is a relative effects. within the, so that means it is actually, if you think about average treatment effect, that means it is doing actually a neighborhood matching. It's finding out a farm which is the nearest farm of an exporter to a non-exporter and estimating the relative effect of this. Okay, so you can see basically the effect is driven significantly by the big farms in terms of the exporters and the non-exporters. And pretty much the same for product scope. If we see, it's pretty much the same. All these big farms are doing more than the small farms, though there are some differences here in the big farms versus non-farms. Let me see the capital employed. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Capital employed, also the big farms have the effect between the non-exporter and the exporter, whereas the small farms have no effect. Okay, so this is pretty much established, right? Importers are different, non-importer, importers are different from non-importers, number of exporters, dynamics change, in terms of performance also it change. So the other task I want to show you an interesting thing, how trade liberalization can affect. So this is a paper from a paper that currently working, it's a working paper. So what we in prowess gives you a very interesting variable, which we found out very lately. The variable is called trade investments. They call it trade investments. Then we had to, what is trade investments? We have to dig out with the definition. So the trade investments are the expenses made by a firm, financial investments made by a firm on another firm along the same supply chain. So they buy out any other firm as input supplier or a customer. So it basically gives you domestic mergers and acquisitions that I am investing along the same supply chain. That means an upstream firm will only, that's it's what we are doing is we are looking at horizontal mergers and acquisition, not vertical. Okay, so I am doing in my same supply chain across within an industry. So if I am a steel firm, I will be investing financial investments in another firm who is an input supplier to my firm or a customer who buys the output from me. That's what the variable gives you. It's a merger. Basically, I am buying out and then other firm out. That's a domestic mergers and acquisitions. That's very interesting. So what we wanted to see was, so standard trade theory or optional value theory or any other theory would say to you that when you have foreign competition or uncertainty or any kind of competition, firms drop investments. Firms do not invest. There is any form of uncertainty in the market, firms started disinvesting. No, they will not invest. They will drop investments. So whether that is true in first case, you want to check whether that is true because India's trade liberalization gives you a very nice quasi-experimental scenario to check about the trade liberalization effect on this kind of variables. What is the time duration? So this is, we use the same, so we are using basically 1990 to 2006. So let me load this data set and show to you. This is 1990 to 2006. You have about 10,000 farms. It's pretty much the same data set comes from prowess. Every farm has a unique ID. It has an industrial classification. Let me open the data set. You can see the industrial classification. You can see the NIC name of the farms, which is the industrial classification. So you know. So you can see this farm is manufacturing vanaspati. So you can see all this in prowess. So it has all the industrial classifications that you want to, and it has bit of more information. It has also the share of Chinese imports. We are checking with something happening with the imports or not. It has exports information. It has but the two important thing that we'll be utilizing is this tariffs. These two information we will be utilizing. Input tariffs and output tariffs. Do you know the difference between input tariffs and output tariffs? So tariffs are defined at the 4-digit level here, but do you know the difference between input tariffs? What are input tariffs and what are output tariffs? Anyone? Output tariffs are tariffs when a foreign firm is coming to our market to sell or when we are importing any finished products. That's an output tariff. When you're importing finished products, that the tariff you can see what was the trade liberalization program. This is an average. India had 218% tariffs in 1990 and it went down to 51%. You can imagine how this is just for 1511, which is producing ghee and stuff. Input tariffs are the one which are applied on if you are importing inputs from abroad. Intermediate inputs, those who are used in production function of a farm, those are called input tariffs. So that's why, how do I calculate this? Output tariffs are given by the World Bank or with data set. I went to then the input output table of the farm or input output table of Indian industries. Then input output table has these alphas. You remember the alphas of input outputs, the coefficient that which industry uses what amount of output of other industry as an input to produce output. So we use those coefficients to calculate these input tariffs from the output tariffs. Input tariffs are not given. There is no data on input tariffs. So you have to estimate input tariffs from those input output coefficients. At the industry. You cannot calculate it. So for this, it's, I guess, before the trade liberalizations, we have it for 1993. There is IOT. Because the tariffs are actually started dropping from 1994, very significantly. So it's just when the liberalization started, we taken the coefficients. There are 1998, 1999, I believe. But by 1998, 1999, things have changed so much. So the tariffs would be, the coefficients would be indigenous. So we taken before the trade liberalization actually started taking. So it's 1998, I believe it's 1993, 1994. However, we can control for endogeneity. So there is data on where is, just a check. Yes. So there are very interesting things in this data. So there is total investment, there is trade investment, there is non-trade investments, and there is investments abroad, outside of India. Prowess gives you a lot of things. So let me first check. When you, so in investments, I label the variable you can see as total investments. But for investments, you need to do zeros because you don't invest every year. You don't carry out investments in every year. So your investments, if I do 1 plus 1 means, what I've done here is check. See, I have replaced investment 0 if there is no information on investments. If I don't do it, the problem is it will be only positive investments that I'm comparing to. And the firm doesn't involve in investments in every year. So I'll only be utilizing years which have positive investments. But I want to compare between the investments and non-investments here. And why I am adding 1? Anyone?
No,
Zero. Because I want to utilize the zeros here. So I am replacing total investments to check whether total investments has an effect on input tariffs and output tariffs. Why I have done L?
Lag.
Anyone? Lag. Why lag?
Endogenous.
Exactly, endogenous. Because I want to see whether the tariffs of 1995 has an effect on the next year. Because otherwise, I'm running into a simultaneity effect. Same year investments can actually influence also tariffs. I don't know. It might not. but it's still, I want to move away as much as from the endogeneity problem. We had to show for this, I've still in the working paper, though India's trade liberalization program is pretty much established in terms of its quasi-natural experiment, that it has done because of external adjustments. It was not done internally. There are external pressures, that's why it was done. But we still had to show that investments actually did not drive this before the reform. Because it could be possible that if some farms might be lobbying for it to get tariffs dropped so that I can do more investments. I'm not showing you there, but those are also endogeneity checks. What I'm doing here is I'm regressing investments on input tariffs and output tariffs, controlling from farm fixed effects, industry year fixed effects, and clustering at the industry level because my tariffs vary at the industry level. So I do want to control for the autocorrelation between different industries. Whether there is an effect, sorry. Let's see, we found no effect. See, there is none effect. Neither of input tariffs, not of output tariffs on total investment. So it doesn't respond to trade liberalization. What we do next is we include here farm controls. We call it farm. Does it differ by the age of the farm or not? I have also defined a quadratic term to see whether there is a nonlinearity involved. Because new farms maybe invest, old farms do not invest. It could be possible, right? I'm just controlling for the age of the farm to see whether there is any differential effect or not. You can see there's nothing changes with the age of a farm. The third one, this is how we build table. The third one, we're checking whether, because there are papers which say that till 2003, the trade liberalization was very much exogenous. After 2003, there are reports that some industries lobbied for dropping of the tariffs. So I am restricting my data set from 1990 till 2003. Yes, you are saying something.
You are controlling for sectoral changes, yearly sectoral changes.
Yearly sectoral changes, yes.
Again, you have control for the industrial sector.
At the 4-digit level, because now, yes, that's an important point, good point. So why I am doing it here at the 2-digit level? And before we did it at the 4-digit level, but not here at the 3-digit. Why? Anyone? Because our tariffs vary at the 4-digit level. If I use at the 4-digit level, all the variations will be absorbed, will be dropped. So that's why I'm doing at the 2-digit. You can do it at 3-digit level.
But I think there might be not major changes.
Not be major changes. 2-digit, 3-digit doesn't matter much. So you have to go one step below where your variable of interest varies.
Sir, why what is the theoretical reasons behind trade liberalization and development? Like on which mechanism?
That's uncertain. Two mechanisms working here. One, output tariffs drop means you are, by yourself as a farm, you can import a lot of finished products here. So as a farm, if I am not its importer, I may not invest in producing more. My investment goes down. The other channel is when output tariffs drop, foreign farm can come and sell in my country. So you have seen from 1990s onwards, MNCs started coming selling in. When MNCs started selling in, because they can produce food at the cheapest price, they can sell high quality goods. I stop producing goods. So if there is uncertainty in the market, then output tariffs can affect investments negatively. Now input tariffs, what's the economic mechanism? If input tariffs go down, what I can do, I can import, yes, it can go up because I can input more intermediate inputs to invest in production function, my investment goes up. So there is an opposite channel. You do not find anything in terms of the total investment. Let's me check with 2004.
So we are having taken lag of age.
So log of age. You don't mean basically age is it's not that endogenous concept. It's not an outcome variable. That's why we haven't taken. We generally take lags when there's an outcome variable.
basically I submitted one paper and then the reviewer asked me to keep the leg structure same.
Okay, that's it the same.
Yes.
Okay.
If you are taking one leg, then
Okay.
But
But it's a taste, it is based on the taste. There's no one method of doing it.
Sir, in the age, it is very like it is linearly dependent to previous year age.
Which one?
Means the present age is linear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. So it wouldn't change much. Things wouldn't change.
Just one.
So here also, even if we cut down the data set in 2003, nothing changes. So total investment does not move accordingly. Now we see the business investments, which is the trade investments. For a business investment, the farm, this is very unique variable. A farm is actually involved in doing an investment which is directly associated with the production of the farm or not. This is, you do not get this kind of variable in other data sets, business investments. That this is directly related to your business, the business you are doing. In directly related to your selling, to your production, everything. Okay, so let's see whether business investments move or not. And see, we have some evidence. No evidence on input tariffs, but there is a positive effect. What does it mean? The positive, what does it mean? The coefficient means what? Is a positive effect or a negative effect? Negative effect. Is drop in tariffs means drop in investments. Is positively correlated. The movement is positively correlated. That means when there is foreign competition in the market, when competition goes up, investments go down. The lower the tariffs mean, the higher the competition. Because now foreign firms can come and sell to your market. The lower the tariffs is, the higher is the competition. For example, the lower the tax is, the higher is the competition. Exactly the tariffs. Tariffs is form of tax, right? So if 10% drop in tariffs would have about 0.5% drop in investments. Business investments. The farm would drop about 0.5%. Investments.
I can get it like why it is output tariff means.
Output tariff means final goods.
Okay, so I feel that is it positive. So
This positive means output tariff is going down. The investments is also going down.
So if output tariff increases, then investment goes up.
It goes up. But it can output tariff, but the point being here, output tariffs actually went down. It didn't increase. It went down, that's why it also went down. The phenomenon is output tariffs went down.
So what is the channel? The sequence.
So this one, output tariffs went up. Just to say the other thing, output tariffs went up, this will went up. Yes, absolutely. Because output tariffs went up means less competition. Yes. So the investments will go up. This is in competition is going up and up because the more less the tariffs is, all the MNCs is coming in and selling in our market. That means the farms is unsure of your sales. My sales. So someone will be buying my product or not. No, I'm unsure because there are higher competition in my market and I'm not doing investments there. Why should I do investments when there's uncertainty in the market? This is what the theory says. If you go to the theoretical mechanism, that's what the theory says, that higher competition brings down innovation investment. They perform because these are long-term investments. Business investments are long-term investments that you occur. This is what the theory says.
So if we reduce the tariff, then my consumers my welfare goes up.
Consumers' welfare goes up. More or less, that is more or less established. But this is that is a bigger picture scenario. This is not from here. There are many aspects of tariffs going down. Good.
So this data can be used for export law, the domestic industry lobby groups to increase tariff.
Do you think they use data?
I mean, their intention is that.
Do you think? The monetary policy group of the RBI has anyone who is a monetary economist? No. No, anyone. Not a single one who is a monetary economist. How does it not the monetary policy? That's the point. That we don't have that's the we don't have any monetary policy. Chetan Bhatte is not monetary economist. He's a macroeconomist, but he's not a monetary economist. It's different. One who works with monetary policies, there are macroeconomists who works in monetary policies. So I don't know they will use it or not, but they don't use data much.
I mean, the business groups will always ask for high tariffs, so that their profit will go away from the data.
No, not always, not always. Business groups which are very efficient, they don't care about much about tariffs because they are MNC. More big business groups are MNCs. They are selling already on different markets. Say, so they can shift profits from one market to other market. So not always the business groups would kind of lobby for higher tariffs. But this Indian tariff liberalization was externally managed more or less because it was part of the commitment of the external adjustment mechanisms. IMF came with the loan and condition was you have to drop tariffs. You have to allow, so if you have read, for example, the recent trade talks between the India and the US, in India want this 25% drop, the tariffs India had 26% or 25% on all goods, that has to be dropped. So what the US said was, we can drop it at the 10% level for what the UK has currently in terms of especially the aluminum and stuff. But in return, they want access to the agriculture market in India. Which that means you can imagine if you have the agriculture market access, that means you have US farms, that means the tariffs on those products will go down. That means the US farms can sell agricultural produced products in Indian market. That means the output tariffs on those products are going down. The competition of the local farmers is increasing because they have to now compete with the US farmers in the local market to sell their products. So what is happening with the output tariffs? Competition is actually increasing. So that the problem is, that means it can drive out investments. I would be very scared to do investments if I have to compete with US farms. That's what is happening here. If I have to compete with foreign farms, people get skeptical, farms get skeptical. And if I control for farm, age is pretty much the same. It actually increases a bit, about 8%, 0.8%. If I restrict it to 2003, it's still about 7%. So nothing changes. Even if however I want to do it, nothing changes. Something change in the non-business investments. Let me check whether there are any effect. No. Sorry. No, nothing changes. So nothing, it's only the investments which are closely connected to my business that moves with trade liberalization and nothing else. Okay. The other aspect of it we are checking here is, it comes from a theory. We also checked investments outside of India before going there, and outside of India changes? No, not much. Here, no, nothing changes apart from business investments. We take a second question. Indian data set, the progress has another very interesting indicator, which gives you the share of families' shares in a farm. Because a lot of Indian farms are family-owned farms. It's a very common feature in a developing country. In Europe, we find it France, mostly in France, people have a lot of farms are managed by family. For example, the biggest of the farms are family managed. We talk about Ambani, we call it Tatas. These are all family managed. So whether there is a differential effect when a farm is a family owned versus non-family owned. When a farm is professionally managed versus when a farm is non-professionally managed. Why this would create a difference? Why What is the theoretical reason behind this? There has to be economic intuition, right? There has to be certain set of research gone behind this. People have found out that family farms has an intergenerational perspective. They take more risk because they are intergenerational perspective. They do long-term investments than the non-family firms, because non-family firms, since the managers, it is being by professionally managed, and you have to give your answer to the MD or whatever the CEO. Something bad happens, they don't try and do risky investments because there's someone up here. There are the managers who want to actually manage the investment portfolio, which is the middle management level, right? They can't answer back if something goes wrong. Their job is at stake to the upper management level. So professionally managed firms are less riskier than the family-owned firms. Also, family-owned firms has a, as I said, long-term generation because their wealth is passed on to generations. So they may have losses right now, but they know my granddaughter or grandson may have the profits. When you are professionally managing firms, that might not happen because you're not seeing you're not seeing the profits of a firm in an intergenerational perspective. The other one, if you see, there's a center called Center for Family Farms in ISB, Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. They also have done some research on family farms. They've shown that the contribution of the family farms in India as Indian sales, Indian GDP has significantly gone up during the liberalization period. Contribution of family-owned farms have gone. They have gone bigger. They are investing more. They are selling more. So all this tend to think us whether we find any differential effect for the family farms versus non-family farms. We will only focus on output tariffs because we didn't find any effect on the input tariffs. So we'll just continue with the output tariffs, not the input tariffs, because input tariffs doesn't have any effect. Okay, so what I'm doing first, there is data on the shares owned by a family. They call it basically, the actual term they use it is Hindu undivided family. That's what is in progress. But it also comes, I guess the Jains, the Christians also in there. There is certain characteristics. I guess it doesn't have, the data set wouldn't have the Muslim managed funds because of certain characteristics of that. But the Muslim managed funds, our business houses are not there in the indicator of this. So what we created was a family farm indicator, which is binary. Like if a family has a share greater than 0, then it's a family farm. Very simple indicator. So we created a variable called F binary, which takes into, we have the shares in this data. I will show you the shares. Family farm indicator, which is a binary, and we interact that with our output tariffs. So what we'll do is this interaction term will give us the differential effect of a farm which is a family managed farm rather than the general effect. This is an absolute effect. This is the differential effect of the output tariffs given that a farm is family managed or comes from a family business house, whatever. Yes.
This also deal with the principal agent problem. Can we relate this?
Yes, absolutely. It also deals with the principal agent problem. Yeah. One aspect of it is the family farms. Why family farms would behave differently to the principal agent problem? Exactly. So there are many reasons why family farm would behave differently. You can put actually a theory, and there is still not a theory. Heterogeneous models, farm theory on family farms. There's not a theory. So you can write a theory on this. Let's see. So if I do this in the role of family farms, it gives very interesting results. So you can see output tariffs continues to be positive, is exactly 7%, but family farms actually do behave the opposite way. That means the output tariff goes down, it goes up. The investment goes up by the family farms. The family farms take more risk. They are more riskier in nature, and that shows up here that they invest more in businesses given when there is higher competition.
So they
And-
when they see the competition, they try to invest.
So why they are investing? What is the economic intention?
They
Why
don't
they are
want-
investing more?
They don't want to lose the market share.
Exactly, they want to secure business because your business has an intergenerational perspective. So you want to secure business. That's why they are investing more. Even if I don't have, come again?
Because other businesses are backing out, so they got.
They have with our business backing out. You see, there is other businesses backing out. You see a chance. You see a competition. You know, even if I lose competition now, I need in the long run to make sure that I'm getting my market share back. So let me start investing now. Because it has an intergenerational perspective, they start investing more because they want to secure their market share because of intergenerational perspective. Because even if I don't have the profits, my granddaughter or child will have the profits of the market share back. Because all these are investments, are long-term investments. That means once you invest in a firm, you cannot take it back. These are not short-term investments, by the way. These are long-term investments. Because there's a difference between short-term investment and long-term investment, right? I believe I take some shares of your firm and just invest it. Well, that's not what talking about. This is long-term investments. So you can see there's a very nice differential effect based on the characteristics of the firm. And this does not differ by the indicator. If we use, we define different indicators. If a family firm has shared more than 30% of all shares, and this is like a medium type of family firm, you can see it will have very similar effect. Very similar effect. Again, negative. But if you actually put this, if we actually put family firm versus non-family firm, put that. So what is the joint effect? What I mean is the joint effect now the output tariffs will be this clusters. So if we actually differentiate between the family firms and the non-family firms, then the joint effect is actually positive. In a sense, negative. That means output tariff goes down, investments goes up. So the drop in the investments by the non-family firms is offset by the increase in the investments by the family firms. So that's why that's the effect, overall effect of the output tariffs would be positive. We did 50% share is also pretty much negative. What we last did was we calculated the actual shares because this could be driven. These are binary variables, right? What we did was we created actual shares. We took shares of those firms, of those family in those firms over the years, and we created an average share of a family in a firm. And we use that share to what is that? Is it actual? When you are using actual shares, does it work or not? Because you have to use different indicators when you are establishing a result. We have to use as possible different indicators to establish a result. Whether the result is robust and consistent across all the possible indicators that you can define based on that indicator. So this is actual share, average share. I'm taking the log of that share and interacting with the output tariffs and run the regression. So you can see it's still negative. Even if we have actual shares, we still have negative share. So the effect more or less holds across any kind of indicator we use, that family firms behave in different way rather than non-family firms. So trade liberalization has a differential effect based on the characteristics of the firm. For a professionally managed firm, it is different. For a family firm, it's different. And there are not much of empirical evidence or theoretical evidence concerning about how family firms and non-family firms behave, especially in a developing country. Even if you go to East Asian countries, let's say South Korea, Japan, there are a lot of family firms as well in those countries. Family managed firms, what I mean is. So this is more or less it that we learned, more or less that their firms are very different. First, I wanted to do because I also show firms are also different, not only exporters versus non-exporters, importers versus non-importers across different sizes. even by the ownership of the farm. Farms are very different. Even if you have family ownership, if you have non-family ownership, farms behave differently. Even within the same, all these are given because we want to check within the same industry or not. Even within that industry, a farm, a family farm versus a non-family farm behaves differently. Even within the leather industry, your farm is family managed and non-family managed, they behave would behave differently. Someone would invest more, someone would invest less. Because there's a theory behind this of these two farms.
Why did you did see in quartiles?
I have done quartiles as well in the paper, but I'm not showing you here. There we have done quartiles as well. Yeah, we have done quartiles. We have done a few more things. We have also looked at farm performance of the farm performance. I mean, family farm versus, because of the investments, whether the family farms are gaining more, selling more than the non-family farms, and we find that effect positive. That because of these investments, the family farms are selling more than the non-family farms. That we have also, because the investments might have to result in some certain outcome, right? I am doing investments, my sale has to go up, and we find exactly that to be true, that the investment, that the sales of those farms are going up.
Not exports.
Not exports, because this is domestic investments, not because the business investment that we see is domestic, that the farms, domestic farms are making investments in the same supply chain of that business of that farm. So it's a domestic M&A, you can call it, mergers and acquisition, more or less. So mergers and acquisitions goes up, domestic mergers and acquisition goes up for family farms, not for professional farms. So inherently what we learned is, the point being, however you want to define companies, these are very different companies. Farm companies are very different. They behave differently, they operate differently, and so that's why we see so very differential effect on certain policies on farm level outcomes. It's any policy you can take, any policy, it's not about trade policy. Any policy change we take, we see differential outcomes because farms are inherently different by characteristics. Right? I want to end here. There's too much information for you guys, and we need to absorb as well. I'll send you all this stuff, so don't worry. I'm working on this paper now. Let's see. You want to write a theoretical module on this? You want to?